When Daniel proposed, it wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect. We were sitting on a park bench near the river where we first met, our fingers sticky from melting ice cream. He didn't kneel. He just looked at me with that steady gaze that always made the world quiet and asked, "Will you keep choosing me?" I said yes before he even finished. I laughed and cried all at once, tasting salt and sugar. For a few hours I floated. I called my mother first, then Olivia. That was my first mistake. Olivia answered on video call, her face perfectly lit, every strand of hair deliberate. When I told her the news, she blinked, then smiled the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. "Oh, that's sweet," she said, drawing out the word like taffy. "You and Daniel are brave." "Brave?" I repeated, still smiling, trying to understand. "Well," she said, glancing off screen as if to an audience, "to plan a wedding on your budget? You've always been such a dreamer." It landed like a pin in a balloon. I felt my laughter deflate. My mother, who'd joined the call in silence, cleared her throat but said nothing. Olivia continued, "I mean, you'll have to be creative. Maybe a backyard thing. Casual can be cute." Daniel was beside me, squeezing my knee gently, signaling, "Don't bite." But my chest burned. "We'll make it work," I said. "Love doesn't need chandeliers." Olivia laughed then, loud enough that Daniel looked away. "That's adorable," she said. "You've always been so grounded." The word sounded like dirt. When we hung up, I stared at my phone. My mother texted afterward, "Don't take it personally, honey. She's just practical. Practical." That was always the family code for cruel honesty. 2 days later, Olivia invited us to dinner. She said she wanted to celebrate properly. I wanted to believe her. I wore my favorite blue dress, the one Daniel said matched my eyes. When we arrived, her dining table glittered with crystal and wine glasses. There were 12 people there, all of them her friends, not mine. "Oh, look, the lovebirds," she announced as we walked in. "Everyone, my sister's engaged. Daniel proposed." The applause sounded polite, not happy. Then came the questions, the kind that sound innocent but sting. "So what's your venue?" someone asked. "We haven't chosen yet," I said. Olivia leaned back in her chair, sipping wine. "They're still figuring out logistics," she said, as if we were deciding between food stamps and fancy napkins. The laughter was soft but sharp. I kept my smile glued on, but inside I was shrinking. Daniel reached for my hand under the table. I whispered, "Let's just get through this." He whispered back, "We will." Dinner dragged. Olivia compared engagement rings, hinted that Daniel's job must be flexible since he worked for a small firm, and made sure everyone knew she was helping out with the guest list, just in case we couldn't handle it. Each word was a cut, but she delivered them with the precision of someone who'd practiced. When dessert came, she tapped her glass. "I've decided," she announced. "I'm going to help you plan your wedding." She smiled at me like a benefactor. "I can't let you embarrass yourself with something small. You deserve something decent," the table murmured approval. I felt Daniel's hand tighten around mine. I wanted to scream, but instead I thanked her. My voice trembled, but I made it sound gracious. After dinner, as we stood outside waiting for our cab, Daniel said quietly, "You don't have to accept that." "I know," I whispered. The night air smelled of roses and smoke, but she just declared war, and she doesn't even know it yet. In that moment, my joy hardened into resolve. I promised myself I wouldn't let her define what real meant. She wanted to save me from embarrassment? Fine, let her. I'd give her a show she'd never forget. Looking back, I realized that Olivia had been competing with me long before either of us knew what the word meant. She was the child who demanded attention just by walking into a room, while I learned to exist in the quiet corners she didn't occupy. When we were little, I'd build paper houses out of shoeboxes. She'd laugh and show off her new dollhouse with lights that actually turned on. Mom would gush about how ambitious she was. Dad would chuckle and say, "That's my girl." I was the one who cleaned up the scraps afterward. When Olivia got her first car, it wasn't enough that it was brand new. She had to park it right in front of the house so everyone could see. I'd saved up for years to buy a used one, a little hatchback with fading paint. She called it adorable, the same way she called a stray cat Adorable. That's how she spoke when she wanted to sound kind but still stay superior. Our parents never corrected her. If anything, they encouraged it. "You know your sister just wants the best for you," Mom would say whenever Olivia's words drew blood. "You could learn from her drive." It took me years to understand that in our house, success was a synonym for expensive. When Olivia got married, the wedding was a televised spectacle in our small town. Imported flowers, a designer gown, a band flown in from Italy. My mother cried during the vows, not because her daughter was in love, but because she was proud of how elegant everything looked. "That's how you do it right," she whispered to me, as if I were taking notes. After the divorce, Olivia never lost her crown. She bought a mansion, redecorated it twice, and filled it with statement pieces that screamed wealth. My parents never saw her loneliness, only the shine. "At least she's stable," Dad once said, sipping coffee from a mug I'd given him. "She knows how to live." I remember smiling politely, even as my chest tightened. I was always the simple one. The one who worked hard, stayed modest, wore the same winter coat for 5 years. When I brought Daniel home for the first time, they liked him well enough, until they learned what he did. He wasn't a lawyer or a surgeon. He was an architect at a small firm, still paying off student loans. I could see the disappointment flicker in my mother's eyes like a shadow. "As long as he makes you happy," she said, which in our family meant we expected better. But Daniel didn't care. He said, "Let them measure love in price tags. I'll measure it in peace." And I clung to that peace like air. Then came Olivia's next move. A week after the disastrous dinner, she called me, voice syrupy sweet. "I've been thinking," she said, "about your engagement party. We can't let it be basic. You should host it here, at my place." Her place was a mansion with marble floors that made everyone whisper when they walked. I hesitated. "Olivia, that's not necessary." "We were planning something small," she laughed, that same bright, echoing laugh that used to make me feel 10 years old. "Exactly why I'm offering. You don't want people thinking you're struggling, do you? Let me handle it. I'll make it tasteful." Her tone wasn't an offer. It was a declaration. That night, I sat with Daniel on our worn-out sofa, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. He looked at me and said, "You know this is about control, right?" I nodded slowly. It always has been. Because in my family, generosity was just another form of dominance. Olivia didn't host events out of love. She hosted them to remind you who could afford the lighting. Still, a part of me wanted to accept. Maybe I was tired of being the humble one. Maybe I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized money didn't make her the hero of my story. "Let her have her mansion," I said finally. "Let her set the stage. I'll bring the truth." And in that quiet moment, I knew the next battle wouldn't be about decorations or catering. It would be about dignity. Because when a family measures love in price tags, the only way to win is to stop playing their game. The night of the engagement dinner felt like stepping onto a stage I hadn't auditioned for. Olivia's mansion glowed like a crystal box, every chandelier a reminder of her need to impress. I told myself to breathe, to focus on Daniel, not the marble floors or the waiters moving like clockwork. But the moment we walked in, I could feel it, the hush that wasn't admiration, just quiet judgment dressed in perfume and pearls. Olivia swept toward us, radiant in a gown that looked more suited for a gala than her sister's engagement dinner. She hugged me with that air kiss routine she'd perfected and turned to Daniel. "You look so sweet," she said, voice drenched in false warmth. "I just love how down-to-earth you are." Her friends, standing nearby with glasses of champagne, exchanged knowing smiles. Dinner was a blur of clinking forks and polished laughter. Olivia sat at the head of the long mahogany table, a self-appointed queen hosting her subjects. She asked Daniel about his work, her tone light but surgical. "So," she said, tilting her head, "you're an architect at a smaller firm, right? Not one of those flashy corporate ones?" Daniel smiled, calm as ever. "Yeah, we do local projects. Community spaces, homes, schools." Olivia nodded, her lips curving in mock admiration. "How noble." Then, Turning to the table, she added, "It's refreshing. Really, a man who builds little schools instead of skyscrapers." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it stung like splinters. I felt my face flush. My fork trembled, but Daniel just squeezed my hand under the table. His thumb traced slow circles on my palm, steadying me. "Let them think what they want," he whispered, his voice barely audible. That whisper felt like armor. Still, every word that night cut deeper. Olivia showed a slideshow of family memories, all her weddings, her vacations, her milestones. I wasn't in half of them. When my picture finally appeared, me and Daniel, smiling on a park bench, she laughed. "Oh, this one. Look at them. So simple, so pure. You two remind me of those wholesome couples in budget commercials." I wanted to disappear. The guests chuckled politely, the kind of laughter that sounds like mercy but tastes like pity. My mother sat beside Olivia, pretending not to notice. My father poured himself more wine. I realized then that silence wasn't neutral. It was complicity. When the meal ended, Olivia rose with a glass in hand. "A toast," she announced. "To my dear sister and her fiancé, may love be enough when money isn't." The room filled with laughter again. Champagne sparkled. Humiliation burned. Daniel stood then, his composure unshaken. "Thank you, Olivia," he said, voice firm. "That's kind. And don't worry. We're not planning a big wedding. We prefer something that feels real." His calm was sharper than anger. Olivia blinked, unprepared for grace. After the guests began to mingle, she approached us, her smile frozen in place. "You know," she said, swirling her drink, "since you're keeping things small, maybe I could help. I'll pay for the wedding." I looked at her warily. "That's not necessary." "Oh, nonsense," she said, waving a manicured hand. "But of course it'd have to be done properly. Invitations, venue, wardrobe. I can't have my sister's wedding looking, well, modest." There it was. The offer wasn't generosity. It was a leash. Daniel met her gaze. "We'll think about it," he said. But as she walked away, her perfume trailing like smoke, I knew he wouldn't need to. That night, when we left her mansion and stepped into the quiet dark outside, Daniel said softly, "That wasn't a dinner. That was a warning." And he was right. Because when someone like Olivia offers help, it always comes with conditions. And a receipt. The next morning, Olivia called as if nothing had happened the night before. Her tone was syrupy sweet, the kind that coats every insult with sugar. "I've been thinking," she began. "You two deserve a beautiful wedding. And since I know how stressful planning can be, especially with, a limited budget, I'll just handle everything for you." I paused, gripping the phone tighter. "Handle everything?" "Of course," she said lightly. "The venue, the food, the decor, your dress, I'll cover it all." Then, before I could thank her, she added, "That way, there's no embarrassment. People can see we still know how to do things right in this family." Her words settled like ice. This wasn't kindness. It was image management. "Olivia," I said carefully, "that's generous. But Daniel and I already have a few ideas." She laughed. "Ideas? Sweetheart, Pinterest boards don't count. Trust me, you'll thank me later when your guests aren't eating buffet food." My chest tightened. I glanced at Daniel across the table. He raised an eyebrow, silently asking if I wanted him to step in. But I shook my head. I needed to face her myself. "Olivia," I said evenly, "we appreciate it, but this is our wedding. We'll plan it together." The silence that followed stretched like a held breath. Then her tone shifted, colder, thinner. "So you're saying no? After everything I'm offering?" "I'm saying thank you, but no." There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "Fine," she said, her composure cracking just enough to reveal the sting beneath. "Good luck affording anything decent, then. I just didn't want people to think you were settling." And with that, she hung up. I sat there for a long moment, the dial tone echoing like a judgment. Daniel reached for my hand. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "I know," I whispered, but my throat ached. Because deep down, I understood what Olivia had really meant. that love without luxury wasn't enough for our family. They measured worth in centerpieces and venues, in car brands and diamond sizes. And by their standards, I'd always come up short. That evening, I replayed the conversation in my head while folding laundry, my anger folding itself neatly between the sheets. For years, I'd accepted the role of the simpler sister, the one who didn't compete, who let things slide. But as I stood there, the hum of the dryer in the background, something hardened quietly inside me. I thought of Daniel, how he never flinched under their judgment, how he never needed to prove his worth to anyone. His calm wasn't weakness. It was strength they'd never understand. And suddenly I knew, this wedding wasn't going to be about proving Olivia wrong with money. It would be about proving her wrong with grace. No showy gowns. No glittering displays of status. Just truth. And a quiet kind of beauty that didn't need approval. Still, part of me burned. Olivia's words weren't just insults. They were fuel. Because if she wanted to see what we could afford, I'd make sure she did, not with dollars, but with dignity. I folded the last towel, turned off the light and whispered to myself, she'll remember this wedding. Everyone will. And I meant it. After Olivia's call, the air in our apartment felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Free from her control, yes, but weighed down by the reality of what we'd just refused. Weddings weren't cheap, and pride didn't pay for venues or dresses. Still, Daniel and I sat at the kitchen table that night, surrounded by bills, notebooks, and takeout boxes, making promises that sounded both reckless and brave. We'll do it ourselves, I said. No strings, no favors, Daniel nodded, determination flickering in his tired eyes. Even if it means selling the car? I hesitated. That car, his old silver Honda, had been with him since college. The air conditioning barely worked, and the paint was fading. But it symbolized years of hard work, independence, and grit. If it helps us start fresh, I said softly, then yes. He smiled. Then it settled. No Olivia, no pity. Just us. For the next few weeks, we lived like soldiers on a mission. Daniel picked up late-night drafting projects, working with clients across time zones. I took extra shifts at the bakery where I helped part-time, frosting cupcakes long after my hands went numb. We'd fall asleep at odd hours, sometimes on the couch, sometimes mid-conversation, but always together. We were exhausted, yet there was a sweetness to it. Every sacrifice felt like a secret act of rebellion against the hierarchy Olivia worshipped. Each dollar saved was a brick in the wall we were quietly building between their world and ours. Then one evening, Daniel came home late, later than usual. I was half asleep when he walked in, his expression unreadable. "You're not going to believe this," he said, placing a small folder on the table. "Mr. Lee wants to partner with me." I blinked, trying to catch up. "Mr. Lee, the client from that community project?" He nodded. "Yeah, he says he's been impressed with my work ethic. Wants to invest in expanding the firm, and he's offering an advance to get things rolling." I sat up, heart thudding. "An advance? How much?" Daniel hesitated, glancing at the folder. "Enough to ease things for a while." "Daniel," I said carefully, "what does that mean?" He smiled, but it wasn't his usual easy smile. It was tight, guarded. "It means we can have the wedding we want. No compromises." I stared at him, uncertain. Why would he offer that now? Did you ask for it? "No," he said quickly. He insisted. Said he believes in me, that this could be something big. Something about the way he said it, the clipped tone, the slight edge in his voice, made me uneasy. But then he reached for my hand, and the warmth in his eyes softened everything. "We don't have to worry anymore," he said. "It's handled." The next day, I found the check sitting on his desk. The amount was more than generous, almost unbelievable. My breath caught when I saw it. Daniel walked in just as I folded the paper back into the envelope. "Don't ask," he said gently with a faint smirk. "Just trust me, I wanted to." God, I wanted to. But as I watched him tuck the check into his briefcase, I felt something shift, a tiny splinter of curiosity that didn't quite feel like doubt. That night, lying beside him, I listened to his breathing and tried to match it, steady and sure. Yet my mind kept circling back to one question I couldn't silence. Who exactly was Mr. Lee? And what kind of investment came with no questions asked? It started with a whisper, the kind that slithers through family circles faster than truth ever can. A coworker mentioned she'd heard something from Olivia's friend, who'd heard something from someone else. By the end of the week, the rumor had bloomed into full scandal. Daniel had begged someone for money to pay for our wedding. I laughed when I first heard it. A short, brittle laugh that didn't sound like me. But when I saw my mother's name flash on my phone, the laughter died. "Sweetheart," she began, her voice already heavy with that familiar mixture of pity and warning. "I just want to remind you to think before you make decisions that..." "Reflect on the family." "Reflect on the family?" I repeated, stunned. "You mean my wedding?" Her sigh was soft but sharp. "I heard Daniel took money from someone. It's all over Olivia's circle. People are saying he was desperate. I just don't want you to embarrass yourself." Embarrass myself. The words landed like stones. "Mom, that's not true," I said, my throat tightening. "Daniel didn't beg anyone. He's working harder than ever." "I hope so," she said quietly, "because people remember these things. Reputations matter." Reputations. That's what my family had always worshipped. They polished their public image so brightly it blinded them to decency. When I hung up, I sat there staring at the wall, feeling something crack inside me. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Olivia. "Hey sis, heard Daniel's been asking for handouts. Want me to cover the catering so you don't have to scrape together change?" My chest burned. She wasn't just spreading the rumor, she was feeding it. And somehow, she made it sound like a joke. Daniel found me sitting on the couch, phone in hand, shoulders slumped. "They're saying things," I murmured, showing him the message. He read it, then placed the phone face down on the table. "Let them talk. How can you be so calm?" I asked, my voice trembling. "They're tearing you apart." He looked at me then, steady, unshaken. "Because they don't know what's coming," he said. "You'll see, love. You'll see." The certainty in his voice both comforted and unnerved me. There was something in his eyes, not arrogance, not anger, just quiet confidence. It was like he already knew the ending to a story I hadn't caught up to yet. The following days were a blur of whispers and sideways glances. Even at work, people tiptoed around the topic of the wedding. I tried to keep my chin high, but insecurity crept in like fog. Slow, quiet, suffocating. Then, one evening, I opened my phone and froze. My notifications were exploding. Messages, comments, tags. Someone had leaked our wedding invitations online. At first, I thought it was another of Olivia's cruel pranks. But as I scrolled, my breath caught. There, in elegant calligraphy, was the venue listed in bold, the Grand Astoria Estate. I blinked, rereading it. The Astoria wasn't just expensive. It was legendary. The kind of place people waited years to book. The kind of place Olivia had used for her second wedding. My hands trembled. I hadn't even seen the final invitations yet. I looked up at Daniel, who was standing by the window watching me. "Daniel," I whispered, "what did you do?" He turned, his lips curving into that calm, knowing smile. "Just wait," he said softly. "You'll see." The morning of the wedding shimmered like a dream I hadn't dared to imagine. The sky was a flawless pale blue, and sunlight spilled over the glass dome of the glass garden, turning every pane into liquid gold. Flowers cascaded from crystal arches, and a string quartet played softly, their music floating through the open courtyard like something out of another world. When Daniel and I arrived, even I had to catch my breath. The place was breathtaking, elegant without excess, expensive without trying. It felt surreal, knowing that the same girl who'd been mocked for budget dreams was now walking into the city's most sought-after venue. The guests began to arrive one by one, each reaction more deliciously stunned than the last. My father's mouth literally hung open. My mother blinked rapidly, as if trying to recalculate her understanding of me. And Olivia, arrived in a designer gown, her expression freezing the moment she stepped through the entrance. She scanned the space with a sharp, assessing gaze, like she was searching for cracks in perfection. Then she spotted me. Her heels clicked against the marble as she approached, her smile tight and glittering. "Well," she said softly, leaning in so only I could hear, "you've outdone yourself with this little fantasy. But you can't afford this, and we both know it." I smiled, calm as a lake before a storm. "Don't worry about it, Liv. Everything's taken care of." Her eyes narrowed. "By who?" "Does it matter?" I replied, straightening my veil. "It's paid for. That's all you need to know." For a moment, she stared at me, her lips parting like she wanted to argue. But the cameras were on her, the guests nearby watching. She plastered on her social smile again, air-kissing me before gliding off, her envy barely disguised beneath perfume and poise. The ceremony began. Sunlight streamed through the glass walls, scattering prisms of color over the aisle. As I walked toward Daniel, I caught sight of Olivia in the front row, whispering something to my mother, who looked pale and uneasy. I didn't care. Daniel's eyes met mine, steady and sure, grounding me. When the officiant said, "You may now kiss the bride," applause filled the air. It wasn't just joy, and it was awe. Whispers floated through the crowd like a tide. "Who paid for this? Maybe her fiancé won the lottery. Didn't they say he was broke?" Every murmur was a melody I'd waited my whole life to hear. At the reception, the atmosphere shimmered with disbelief. Waiters in white gloves glided between tables. Champagne glasses sparkled like jewels. Even Olivia's friends, the same ones who'd once laughed about our simple love story, were filming everything on their phones, eager to post proof that they'd been there. Olivia, however, looked like someone chewing on glass. She smiled when people looked her way, but her eyes were restless, scanning the room, calculating, unraveling. At one point, she brushed past me, her perfume sharp and citrusy. "You've really gone all out, haven't you?" she said, voice dripping with false admiration. "I suppose I learned from the best," I replied, sipping my champagne. Her jaw twitched. "You can drop the act. Who funded this circus? Because unless Daniel's moonlighting as a millionaire, this doesn't add up." I turned toward her slowly, holding her gaze. "Then maybe your math's wrong." Before she could respond, someone called her name from across the room, one of her socialite friends, and she was forced to turn away. Smile fixed, frustration radiating off her like heat. But I saw her later, just before dinner, slipping away toward the garden where Daniel was standing with Mr. Lee, the man who'd once been just a name on his client list. They were talking quietly, Daniel's posture relaxed, Mr. Lee's expression unreadable. Olivia's curiosity finally won. She approached them, pretending it was coincidence, her voice lilting like honey but carrying steel underneath. I couldn't hear what she said, but I saw Daniel's smile falter, then return, cool and controlled. And in that instant, the calm shimmer of the night began to tremble. Because if Olivia wanted answers, she wasn't going to stop until she got them. The reception had reached that perfect hum, laughter, music, the clink of glasses, when Olivia decided to strike. I was standing near the floral arch, talking with an old college friend, when I heard her voice slice through the music like a blade. "So, Daniel," she said, loud enough for half the hall to turn, "tell me again who paid for this little fairy tale." The chatter dimmed instantly. Guests shifted, heads tilting toward the commotion. Daniel stood a few feet away, calm as ever, a glass of champagne in hand. Olivia stepped closer, her smile stretched thin, her tone dripping with performative sweetness. "Oh, don't be shy," she continued. "Everyone's curious. You know, after all those rumors, the ones about you begging for money. Or maybe," her eyes glittered maliciously, "maybe you found yourself a sponsor." A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd, small, nervous, hungry for scandal. My stomach dropped. Cameras were already lifting, guests recording on their phones, scenting blood in the air. Daniel didn't flinch. He set his glass down, straightened his tie, and looked at Olivia with a quiet that made her seem suddenly smaller. "Olivia," he said evenly, "you always did love an audience." She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. I just think the truth should be public. A venue like this doesn't pay for itself, unless, of course, you had a little help from outside sources." Her tone was sing-song now, every syllable baited. My mother stood frozen nearby, eyes darting between them. I wanted to step in, to stop it, but Daniel lifted a hand, not in anger, but as if to say, "I've got this." He took a single step forward. The room went still. "You're right, Olivia," he said, his voice carrying easily across the hall. "We didn't pay for it." Gasps broke out. Someone dropped a fork. Cameras zoomed in. Olivia's expression sharpened into triumph. "I knew it!" she said, turning toward the crowd. "See, I told you. They've been living a lie, pretending they could—" "But," Daniel interrupted softly, "you didn't ask who did." The words hit like a thunderclap. The room hushed again, the tension almost visible in the air. Olivia blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" Daniel smiled, small, deliberate, unshaken. "You wanted transparency, right? Then let's be transparent." He looked past her then, toward the massive glass doors at the far end of the hall. Sunlight spilled through as they opened, and every head turned. A man stepped inside, impeccably dressed, silver-haired, exuding quiet authority. His presence shifted the energy instantly, commanding attention without a word. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel said, his tone smooth as silk. "Meet Mr. Lee." The name rippled through the crowd. Some recognized it immediately, whispered it like it carried weight. Mr. Lee, the international investor, philanthropist, and founder of one of the largest architectural firms in the country. Olivia's face drained of color. She turned back to Daniel, her confidence faltering for the first time. What is this?" Daniel's expression didn't change. "You wanted to know who paid for the wedding," he said softly. "Ask him." The cameras followed as Mr. Lee walked closer, his smile polite but unreadable. Olivia's breath quickened, her earlier smugness dissolving into uncertainty. And as the murmurs swelled again, half awe, half confusion, I realized Daniel had just turned her public humiliation into her own undoing. Because whatever came next, everyone knew one thing now. This wasn't a story of desperation. It was about to become one of revelation. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. All eyes were on Mr. Lee as he approached the center of the hall, his polished shoes echoing against the marble. He extended his hand toward Daniel, and the two men shook like old allies. Not strangers, not business acquaintances, but partners bound by something deeper. "Many of you may not know this," Mr. Lee began, his voice calm yet commanding. "But years ago, I was on the brink of losing everything. My company was under investigation for an accounting error, one that wasn't even ours. It was a competitor's smear campaign. I was drowning in legal fees and betrayal." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the crowd, letting the suspense breathe. And out of nowhere, a young man appeared. He was working for a small consulting firm at the time. He had no reason to help me, no connection to my company. Yet he spent weeks investigating on his own, gathering data, cross-checking documents, even risking his job to send me proof that cleared my name. Olivia blinked rapidly, confusion flickering across her face. "You're talking about him?" she stammered, pointing at Daniel as though her brain couldn't process the idea. Mr. Lee smiled. "Yes, Miss Olivia, him. Daniel didn't just save my company. He saved hundreds of employees from losing their livelihoods. He refused payment. He told me, just do something good for someone else one day." The room went utterly still. Even the music seemed to fade, leaving only the soft hum of disbelief. I looked at Daniel, my Daniel, standing there with quiet humility, not pride. I felt my chest tighten with something between awe and love. I had known he was good. I hadn't known he was extraordinary. Mr. Lee continued, his tone gentler now. Years later, when I learned Daniel was getting married, I decided it was my turn to return the favor. So, I made an offer. Let me host your wedding. At my venue. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Heads turned. Whispers rose like waves. Olivia's eyes darted from Mr. Lee to the glass walls around us. "Your venue?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. Mr. Lee's expression deepened into something almost amused. "Technically, our venue. Daniel and I co-own the Glass Garden now. It was part of our latest investment partnership." Gasps. Audible, sharp, disbelieving. I caught Olivia's reflection in the mirrored column beside her. Her complexion pale, lips parted, eyes wide as though the floor had just tilted beneath her. Daniel turned to her, finally speaking. His voice was calm, steady, the quiet power of someone who no longer needed to prove anything. "You wanted to know how we could afford it. We didn't rent this place, Olivia. We own it." A stunned hush blanketed the hall. The very air felt heavier. Even my mother's hand, which had been clutching her champagne glass, trembled slightly before she set it down. Olivia tried to laugh, a high, brittle sound. "You're lying. You're making this up just to..." Mr. Lee interjected smoothly. "You're welcome to check the business registry, Miss Olivia. Daniel's name is right beside mine." The color drained completely from her face. It was poetic. The same sister who measured worth by brands, who flaunted luxury as love, now standing speechless inside a place her sister's fiancé owned. I should have felt triumph, but all I felt was a deep, cleansing release, as if years of quiet humiliation had finally washed away. Guests began applauding softly, a ripple of admiration spreading across the room. A few even raised their glasses toward Daniel. He nodded politely, his gaze never leaving Olivia's. When the noise quieted, he spoke again, softer this time, but every word sharp enough to cut. "And in case anyone's wondering," he said, "yes, we covered the catering too." A ripple of laughter spread through the guests, genuine and relieved. The tension shattered like glass. He paused, eyes glinting with something playful and final. "For everyone." The crowd erupted, laughter, applause, cheers blending into a single roar of release. Olivia stood frozen, her perfect composure unraveling as she realized the irony. The woman she mocked for not affording her own wedding had just hosted a celebration grander than she'd ever imagined, in a place her own family couldn't buy if they tried. And as I stood beside Daniel, our fingers intertwined, I didn't need to say a word. The truth had already done all the talking. The applause still echoed faintly when Olivia finally found her voice again. Her usual confidence, that sharp, commanding tone, was gone. What came out instead was shaky, fragile. "Wait," she said, stepping toward us, her heels clicking unevenly against the marble floor. "Please. I didn't know. I didn't mean to." Her words tangled together, collapsing under their own weight. The guests, still clustered nearby, turned to watch, sensing something raw unraveling. The laughter and celebration quieted into a respectful hush. Daniel stood calmly, his hands clasped before him. Olivia took another step forward, her eyes wet, her voice trembling now. "Daniel, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things. About you. About both of you. I was just..." She paused, swallowing hard. "I was jealous. I thought you were taking her away from us, from the family." The irony was bitter. She had never truly wanted to keep me close, only above me. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, the way one might look at an old photograph, familiar but distant now. "Olivia," he said finally, his tone soft but firm. "You weren't jealous of losing your sister. You were jealous she found happiness without your permission." A murmur spread through the crowd. Olivia flinched as though the words had struck her physically. "Please," she whispered, voice breaking. "I just want to make it right." Daniel glanced at me, then back at her. "Some things," he said quietly, "aren't fixed with words." He turned, pressing a light kiss to my hand. and began to walk away. The crowd instinctively parted for him, silent and reverent, as though they understood what dignity looked like when it didn't need to shout. Olivia reached after him, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Daniel, please!" But he didn't turn back. I stood there, heart steady for the first time in years. She turned to me, desperate now. I didn't mean to humiliate you. I thought you were making a mistake, that you'd regret it. I only wanted you to have the best." I met her gaze, calm but unyielding. "You didn't need to believe in us," I said softly. "You just needed to respect us." The words landed heavier than any outburst could have. Around us, guests nodded, subtly. Some even clapped, not loud or mocking, but gentle, affirming. The kind of applause that feels like justice finally catching up. Olivia's face crumpled, her makeup smudging as the applause faded. She looked around, searching for someone, anyone, to defend her. But for the first time, no one did. My mother stood in silence, eyes downcast. She didn't intervene, didn't comfort her. It wasn't cruelty. It was recognition. The quiet acknowledgement that this reckoning was long overdue. I turned away then, walking toward Daniel across the glittering floor. The band resumed softly, the lights shifting to gold again, as if the universe itself wanted to move forward. Behind me, I heard Olivia's breath hitch, a sound so small it almost disappeared under the music. When I glanced back one last time, she was sitting at an empty table, staring at the half-empty champagne flute in her trembling hands. The woman who once measured everything in money and admiration now had neither. And though part of me pitied her, another part, the part that had swallowed years of humiliation and silence, finally exhaled. Because for once, I didn't need her approval. I already had something she never understood: peace. The morning after the wedding, the city still glittered faintly beneath the pale light. But everything felt quieter, softer. The chaos, the tension, the public spectacle had all settled into a strange kind of calm. Daniel and I sat by the window of our suite, untouched breakfast trays beside us, watching the sun rise over the skyline. For the first time in months, I could breathe without bracing myself for judgment. When my phone buzzed, I almost ignored it. But then I saw my mother's name. Her voice was gentle, almost fragile. "We watched everything again this morning," she said. "Your father and we owe you an apology." For a moment, I didn't speak. Part of me had waited years to hear those words. The validation I thought I'd stopped needing. "You don't owe me anything," I said finally, my tone even. "But I do need things to change." I told them that I loved them, but I wouldn't keep bending myself small to fit into their version of family harmony. Silence had been their choice before. Distance would be mine now. My mother sniffled quietly. "You sound like your grandmother," she said, almost smiling. "Strong." I smiled too, realizing maybe she finally saw me for who I'd become. After we hung up, Daniel wrapped his arms around me. "That sounded like closure," he murmured. "It was," I said, and I meant it. Later that afternoon, we boarded our flight. A surprise Daniel had planned to a quiet island far from the noise of our families and their expectations. When the plane lifted off, I looked down at the shrinking city lights and felt something inside me loosen. All those years of comparison, of trying to prove worth through someone else's eyes, finally dissolving into nothingness. Daniel leaned close, whispering, "We made it through." I rested my head on his shoulder. "Not just through," I said softly. "We made it beyond." As the clouds swallowed the world below, I thought about how strange peace can feel after so much chaos. Not loud or triumphant, but calm, steady, like exhaling after holding your breath too long. Hours later, in the warm quiet of our beachfront villa, I unpacked my phone again. Dozens of messages still flooded in. Congratulations, praise, even strangers online writing things like, "That ending was legendary." But one notification stopped me cold. A message from Olivia. Her profile picture, once bold and confident, now looked faded, almost somber. I hesitated before opening it. The message was short. I want to make things right. For a long time, I just stared at the screen, feeling a swirl of emotions I couldn't name. Pity, caution, maybe even hope, all tangled together. Daniel noticed my stillness and touched my hand. Everything okay? I nodded slowly, locking the phone and setting it face down on the table. Yeah, I said quietly, just unfinished business. Outside, the ocean rolled against the shore, steady and endless, the perfect sound for beginnings that come after endings. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, just my name written in Olivia's elegant, looping handwriting. I recognized it instantly, that perfect cursive that used to appear on expensive birthday cards and embossed invitations. But this envelope was different. It looked tired, the edges slightly bent, the paper thinner than what she used to favor. I hesitated before opening it, fingers tracing the seal as if touching it could prepare me for what waited inside. When I finally unfolded the pages, I could almost hear her voice again, confident once, now wavering between confession and regret. She began simply, I don't expect forgiveness. I just need to say this somewhere you might see it. She wrote that envy had been her shadow since childhood, a presence she didn't recognize until it consumed her. She admitted she'd compared everything, houses, cars, even smiles, that every time someone praised me, she felt smaller. That she wore her success like armor, mistaking admiration for love. Her words were raw, unpolished, nothing like the sharp, performative tone I'd come to expect. She confessed that her marriage was ending, that the mansion felt empty now that her husband had left and the staff had dwindled. I used to think money meant stability, she wrote. Now I realize it only ever bought quiet rooms to cry in. I paused, my heart tightening. There it was, the truth she'd never been able to say out loud. She told me she'd watched the wedding video a dozen times, not to relive her humiliation, but to understand what she'd missed. You didn't win because you had more, she wrote. You won because you stopped needing anyone to see you to know your worth. I spent years chasing what you already had. By the time I reached the last paragraph, my eyes blurred. I wish I had celebrated you instead of competing. I wish I'd known how to love without measuring. I'm sorry, sister. Truly sorry. I sat there for a long time, letter trembling slightly in my hands. Outside, the afternoon light shifted across the room, painting everything gold. For a moment, I thought about writing back, about saying that I forgave her, that I understood jealousy too, that we'd both been shaped by the same unspoken family contest. But when I picked up the pen, nothing came. There were no right words, and maybe, I realized, no need for them. I folded the letter neatly, slipping it back into the envelope. I didn't throw it away. I just placed it in the drawer beside my wedding ring box, where memories lived quietly, because sometimes silence isn't emptiness. It's peace. I thought about how Olivia had once mocked my quietness, saying it made me seem weak, invisible. Yet now, after everything, it was silence that defined the end of our story. I didn't need to correct her, comfort her, or reopen wounds to prove anything. My stillness was the answer she'd never expected. Calm, final, dignified. Later that night, I stepped outside, barefoot on the balcony, the ocean whispering below. The wind tugged softly at my hair as I looked up at the stars, steady, distant, unbothered by human pride. I smiled faintly. For the first time, I didn't feel like I'd lost a sister. I felt like I'd finally released the version of her that had always needed to win. The letter remained unread by anyone else, its contents known only to me. And as I closed the drawer that night, I realized that my silence had spoken louder than any reply ever could. It's strange how quiet the world becomes when the noise of comparison finally fades. For years, I thought the ache in my chest came from not having enough. Not enough praise, not enough approval, not enough proof that I was worthy. But now I see it clearly. The ache came from chasing someone else's reflection instead of recognizing my own. Envy doesn't begin as anger. It begins as fear. The fear that someone else's light means less room for your own. Olivia lived in that fear for so long that it became her compass, guiding her toward everything shiny and hollow. And for a while, I mistook her direction for success. I thought her laughter at my simplicity was confidence. It was only later I realized it was defense, armor made of diamonds and debt. Love cannot survive in competition. The moment we start measuring affection through what can be bought, we start bankrupting our souls. My family spent years mistaking money for care, control for love, and silence for peace. But peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of understanding. When Daniel and I started over, we did so not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove ourselves right. We built a life from humility, not spectacle, one where small joys mattered more than grand impressions. The taste of shared morning coffee meant more than any 5-star brunch. The freedom to laugh without judgment became wealth that couldn't be taxed or tallied. Often think about Olivia now, about the sister who once mocked my plain, dresses and now lives in a house that echoes with regret. I don't hate her. I don't even pity her anymore. I understand her. Because I've walked through envy's shadow too. I just decided not to live there. True wealth isn't visible. It's the quiet strength to love without needing to be envied. It's knowing that respect can't be bought, and dignity doesn't need an audience. If I've learned anything, it's that life eventually forces us all to reckon with what we value most. Some realize it too late, standing in the ruins of what they thought mattered. Others learn it slowly, through heartbreak and humility, until peace replaces pride. As I close this chapter of my life, I feel no need for revenge, no lingering bitterness. Only gratitude for the struggle, the humiliation, the lessons hidden inside every cruel word. Without them, I would have never discovered the quiet power of self-worth. I used to think love was something to earn. Now I know it's something to give freely, but only once you've given it to yourself first, and maybe that's the real victory. Not the venue, not the applause, not even the justice, just this. The calm after the storm, the peace that doesn't need to be proven. Months had passed since our wedding, yet the memories lingered like sunlight through glass. Warm, bright, impossible to ignore. Daniel and I had settled into a rhythm of quiet mornings, late-night walks, and laughter that didn't need witnesses. Life had returned to its ordinary magic, the kind that doesn't demand approval or applause. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived in the mail, delicate and unassuming. My name was written in Olivia's familiar looping script. For a moment, I froze, the old tension rising like a shadow across my chest. But when I held it in my hands, I realized the envelope wasn't glossy, wasn't decorated with ribbons or gold foil. It was simple, almost humble, a contrast to the grandiosity she once worshipped. I tore it open slowly, carefully, as if savoring a book I wasn't sure I wanted to finish. Inside was an invitation. Olivia's second wedding. Small, intimate. No sprawling halls, no designer gowns flaunting wealth. Just a handwritten note asking me to attend, a modest gathering of close family and friends. I smiled softly, feeling a strange weight lift. For the first time, she wasn't asking for admiration, competition, or validation. She was extending an olive branch, not perfect, not guiltless, but genuine. I turned to Daniel, holding the invitation in my hands. His eyes sparkled with curiosity. "What do you think?" he asked, tilting his head. I folded the paper neatly, setting it down beside my morning coffee. "I think she's learning," I said. Slowly, painfully. Learning that love doesn't need to be measured in diamonds or grand gestures. And in that moment, I realized I didn't need to attend. I didn't need to witness her transformation or approve her choices. My role wasn't to judge, correct, or intervene. I had already claimed the victory that mattered, peace. But I wanted to leave a trace of wisdom, a reminder that even when lessons are hard, they can be understood. So I wrote a small gift to send alongside her invitation, a handwritten note, simple and clear. Love doesn't need a price tag, no sarcasm, no hidden meaning, no reminder of past humiliations, just the truth I had lived. the truth I hoped she might grasp. I slipped it into an envelope, sealed it, and left it at the post office the next morning. The act felt lighter than any gift I could have bought. It was quiet power, my message traveling without drama, without spectacle, but with certainty. My boundaries intact, my heart intact, my spirit unshaken. That evening, as Daniel and I walked along the beach, the horizon blushed with the setting sun. The waves lapped gently at our feet, steady and forgiving. I realized that life's greatest celebrations weren't always those held under crystal chandeliers or captured by hundreds of cameras. Sometimes they were moments of inner clarity, moments when you understood that you had outgrown the petty judgments, the envy, the noise. And just like that, the storm had passed. I felt no triumph over Olivia, only a calm, enduring strength. Love for me was simple now. It was honest, it was quiet, and it was free. I breathed in the salt-tinged air and smiled. The lesson was clear, the journey complete. I had survived the envy, the humiliation, and the whispers, and in the end, I had discovered the true cost of love. Nothing at all, except the courage to claim it for yourself.